Hi, I'm Tiffany and this is Towering TBR. Today I'm here to do the Midyear Book Freakout Tag, in which I get to talk about my reading so far this year. The first question is, what's the best book you've read so far in 2022? I think the best book I've read this year has to be 10 Steps to Nanette by Hannah Gadsby. Hannah Gadsby is a queer Australian comedian who recently became somewhat of a household name due to her Netflix comedy specials. So then she wrote this memoir talking about what her life is like with autism, with mental health issues, with, starting out as a comedian and, maybe not getting all of the support from her family like she expected. It's a pretty dark humor, but she narrates the audiobook herself, and I found it funny and sad, hopeful and insightful. So, definitely the best book I've read this year. What is the best sequel you've read so far in 2020? I don't actually read that many series. I usually prefer standalones, but I started the Bobiverse series this year, which starts with the book We Are Legion, We Are Bob. And so the best sequel would be the second book for We Are Many by Dennis E. Taylor. Bob is a replicant. His consciousness is brought back after his physical death. And he can clone himself and figure out all sorts of science and physics. And he does so he works to keep humanity safe and find habitable planets. And it was fast-paced, funny, and quite thrilling. I really enjoyed that book. What's a new release you haven't read yet but want to? I really am quite excited to get to Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro. This is a historical fantasy set in Victorian London, and there's a magical school, and the children have to use their powers to overtake some evil that's threatening both the magical and the mundane world. I am on my library's hold list, and I'm hoping I will get to read it next month. What is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year? I am eagerly excited about The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. It's a fantasy book, and that's pretty much all I know about it. But I read his first book, The Vanished Birds, last year, and it was this beautiful character-driven sci-fi, and just I loved the world building he did with sci-fi, and I'm excited to see what he does in a fantasy. What's the biggest disappointment you've read so far? I'd say that has to be Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukafka. This was on my most anticipated list, and yeah, it was a bummer. It's about a guy who's a serial killer, and he's on death row, and his story gets told by three women whose lives intersect with his. And unfortunately, there wasn't any tension. There wasn't any mystery. It was just a character study, but a very boring one. And yeah, not at all the thriller I expected it to be. So I gave that 2 stars and wouldn't really recommend it. What was the biggest surprise? I would have to say my biggest surprise is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I read A Christmas Carol a couple of Christmases ago, and I fell in love with Dickens' writing. It's flowery, it's extensive, a lot of people don't like it, but I was blown away by it. His characters just felt so authentic and real, and I read this back in January, and I'm still thinking about it. So, yeah, that really surprised me because I don't usually love classics quite so much. Who's your favorite new author? My favorite new author has to be Kai Harris. She wrote What the Fireflies Knew, which debuted, I want to say in February or March. She is an incredible writer. The sentence by sentence levels, I was stunned she was a debut author. It's about KB and her sister. Their father has just died, and their mother drops the girls off at her estranged father's house. And the little girl, KB, is going through a lot of change. She doesn't understand why her dad died. She doesn't understand why her mom left her and her sister. She doesn't understand why there was an estrangement with her grandparent in the first place. And so over the course of the book, she grows up a lot. She learns what it's like to be an adult. And it was just a gripping, hard-hitting family story, and I loved it. And so yeah, whenever she puts out another book, I'm going to get it because it was amazing. Newest fictional crush. I don't really get fictional crushes, but I will say I did listen to David Copperfield on audiobook, and it's narrated by Richard Armitage, and I got a bit of a crush on him. His voice is amazing. I definitely want to seek out other books he's narrated. Your newest favorite character? I would have to say Crystal from the utterly uninteresting and unadventurous tales of Fred the Vampire Accountant by Sean Hayes. She's a monster hunter, and she's an old friend of Fred who has become a vampire, and they kind of team up and take on the supernatural world, and it's funny and awesome and reminds me of Buffy, and Crystal is just a badass character, and there are 6 more books actually in the series, so I'm looking forward to getting to know her even better. What's a book that made you cry? Well, this year's been tough, and I have been purposely avoiding some books that I thought would be sad or traumatizing or would make me cry. But I will have to say How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu definitely made me tear up. This is a interconnected short stories novel. It's kind of in between, and it's about a pandemic and how these different groups of people react to it and what happens, and some of the things that happened were just, they were sad. They made my eyes tear up, and I think if you're ready for a pandemic book, I would recommend it. I thought it was really good. But if you're not ready for a pandemic book, I'd say hold off for that one a little bit. What is a book that made you happy? So I reread Nimona by N.D. Stevenson this year because I saw that they had created an audiobook to go along with the graphic novel. They had sound effects and they had voices for different characters, and it was such a joy to reread that story and to have the audiobook as well. Nimona is a shapeshifter, and she goes to work for the villain of the town. And she comes up with these dastardly plans of how they can overtake the city or the hero. And she's just funny. The book has kind of a wry wit that just makes me smile every time I think of it. What is the most beautiful book you've bought or received? I would have to say I haven't bought that many books this year, but I bought The Removed by Brandon Hobson, and I think that cover is gorgeous. I've seen that it's got pretty low reviews on Goodreads, so hopefully it's more than just a pretty picture. But it's about a family drama, about a family who loses their son, I think, to police violence and how they cope and deal with their grief. So it seems like it'd be a hard-hitting story. It's definitely beautiful. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? Well, I said at the start that I'm not much of a series reader, but I have 3 series that are continuing on in the latter half of this year. So I still need to get to Silverborn by Jessica Townsend. That's the 4th book in the Nevermore series. I still want to get to The Golden Enclaves, which is the 3rd book in the trilogy by Naomi Novik. And I also want to get to Amari and the Great Game, which is the 2nd book in that series by B.B. Alston. So yeah, I have quite a few coming out in the next couple of months that I'm really excited for. All right, have you read any of these books? Tell me, what was your biggest disappointment or your favorite book? Or tell me both. All right, thank you for joining. Bye.